So here, for example, we start with John Ruskin, Migratory Dairy School. We have, let me see if I have that. So we have also, this woman who created in 1870 the first housekeeping cooperative. We have also, for example, a scientist who created the first seed bank. And of course, then we enter this idea of art, and of course, Arte has a lot to give to the Russian constructivists, and all this time in which actually a government decided that art has to be useful, socially useful. So this is extremely important for this project. And then, of course, we go to an example like Legislative Theater, Augusto Boal, and so on. We have these three categories, but at the same time, we have to certify them. Why? Because many times, in part because the art world have this situation where they love his stories so much. There are many artists who come with this story like, oh, I did this device, and this device have done this, and I worked with 7 immigrants, and they were so happy. And then what happened is like the sole source of certification for the work is the artist himself, who makes the story about what happened. I was recently in Mexico, and I was talking to somebody who was the curator, Osvaldo Sanchez, who was the curator of Insight, and I was asking him about certain works that were produced for his show that I always consider arte util for sure, because I talked to the artist and it's, yeah, everybody use it, and we had these stories that are wonderful. And then he was very honest and say, this was our intention, but at the end we encountered difficulties because several reasons, either social or time or money, etc. So he was like, no, that was only, it never happened. So we realized that we have to certify the work with people who really use the work, to make sure how they feel, if it really was what they wanted, etc. So yes, sometimes you have a work that you certify as arte util, and it was not intended to be art. One example is NSK passport. I'm sure you know this example. And where they created this false passport, a passport for this false country. And it was, of course, all autonomous, fantastic art for imagination only. But then what happened is like they show in South Africa, in the biennial, and some of the people there realized that they was doing passports for free. And a lot of people apply for this passport from Nigeria, and they actually start using this passport to go to other countries. And some were able to use it until they find out, and of course, and actually what we know is that the artists went themselves there to explain people don't use it. This is like an example, this is a joke, this is art, this is not real. And Nigerians, people that they were talking to say, we don't care, we're going to try. You know? And then this is an example of when the artist is not intended to do something useful, but people find the use and do it. So yes, it's possible. So the first question is, what is arte util? Which is the name of my course. So arte util is, this is the logo of arte util, which as you can see is a A of arte being upside down, like util. So it's making, hopefully, upside down art. And the arte util is translated roughly in English as useful art or beneficial art. And it is a concept I am developing about certain practices that have been happening in the arts and done by artists for a long time. So for a while I have seen a tendency for certain practices in the arts where the artist is very interested in providing solution to problems through art. So using art as a problem solver in a way, a social problem solver, and also there is another tendency, which is artists who likes to use art as tool for something else. So arte útil in Spanish means art, and util, as I said before, is beneficiary, but at the same time, util is a tool. So in this case, art works in both ways, as I have explained it. So if you have any questions, something is not clear, you can interrupt. Awesome. So the idea is that I have seen all these practices, so I came up with some elements, which is some criteria to kind of see arte util, what is arte util, and kind of understanding very quickly. This is kind of the image of this project, which is the Marcel Duchamp's urinal back in the bathroom, so people can pee and at the same time enjoy art. So the criteria that we have created and help us, as you can see, kind of locate arte util projects. So the first element is that art has to have proposed new uses for art in society. So already we understand that this is coming from a social art practice history. So it's not a practice that is using the kind of traditional individual artist studio setup, but it's something that already understand that is going to be social and probably in the public sphere somehow. It has to challenge the field within it operates, meaning that these are artists that most of the time, because they are interested in social issues, when they start working in this, they start going into other areas and other disciplines. Let's say the legislative disciplines, they start working with laws, they start working with legal aspects in society. But in a difference from other practices, these kind of artists have to come up with something that is useful and is new and it challenge the status quo of that field as well as the art field. So it is not enough for these artists to just come up with a utopic proposal that will happen only in the mind of people, only in the kind of a space for speculation, but also trying to implement it in reality, and through this implementation then challenge the way this institution, organism, laws function. So also to be timing specific, meaning respond to the urgencies of the moment. This is very important because this is not art that is atemporal. This is art that, because it responds to, it tries to solve a specific problem, it has to locate those specific problems in a place and a time, you know. And of course, this understand that all of these problems change all the time, so the practice has to change. That also makes the art not a permanent condition. This, the artistic aspect is a temporal condition, it's a condition that you can activate. So the other element, and it's very important, that you don't see it, but the 1, 4, and 6 are the most important ones, is to be implemented and function in real situations. So again, as I said before, this is not something an artist can dream about, and you can share this dream with other people as a dreaming situation. This is something that you have to find somehow the tools into going the real and have real change. And therefore, of course, you will have to work with people, you have to modify your project because of this. The 5th element is replace author with initiators and spectators with users. So in this practice, we are not interested in the idea of authorship, because we already understand that the author is only an initiator, meaning is only somebody who came up with an idea that want to share with the community that is part of the situation of the problem or the elements they want to deal with. And it is understood that first, this practice is not only done by them, but other people will be collaborating in a creative way, and also that at some point they will not have the control of the work anymore. Slowly they will lose control of the work, and they will be only remembered maybe as the initiators. And this is great because today in class we were looking at the work of a group called Wochenklausur. And it's funny because at one point we were seeing some of their project, and it's something they did in Chicago where I lived, and they mentioned that a consequence of their project is a group called Material Exchange, and actually I met these people from Material Exchange and I worked with them, and I never knew these initiators were part of this. So in a way, this is a practice that is not valuing so much this idea of the name of the artist or the artist as an individual, but just as somebody that initiates an idea and is shared and taken over by others. And the idea of spectators with users, because as we were talking 2 minutes ago in class, we have a lot of problem with this practice and also with social engaged art, where still there is this idea that people come to the show to see something instead of to be part of something, or instead of to change something, or to and also this idea that people are spectators, maybe even participants, but even that for us is something that is not active enough, and it doesn't show the commitment the people coming to this experience have to have. So this is not something where you go to a museum for 10 minutes, see a video, maybe you don't finish, see a sculpture very quickly and have an overview of a show. This is something where you have to, as quote-unquote audience or spectator, you have to commit in time and ideas and creativity to the project in order to experience it. So the number 6, which is also very important, is to have a practical beneficial outcome for its users. Why? Because a lot of projects we have seen look like beneficial and look like useful, but the person who has the most benefit is the artist himself. Either because he became more famous, or because he had a great show in his show, and then it means that if this dynamic happens, then what happens is that you don't have users. Instead, you are using people, which is something very different. So I think it's very important that the artists understand that the main benefit is going to be for the people they're working with. And the other one is to pursue sustainability while adapting to a changing condition. This is also important because we have seen, especially in social art practice, and not all social art practice is arte util. So it doesn't, it's an extra level of intensity, let's say, to do arte util. But we feel that sometimes it's very important for arte util practice to understand that this is not a one-time and a one-week excited event. This is a commitment to a community, and this is something that has, in order to change something socially, has to have a long-term life. Because when you work in the, let's say, in the social timing is different from the art world timing. So you have to understand that things take longer and needs to be sustainable and work on their own. And the last one is reestablish aesthetic as a system of transformation. And this is very important because a lot of people always say, where is the art in this, or where is the aesthetic, and so on. So we find that the idea is to create a kind of ecosystem in which witnessing or being part of a transformation is actually the aesthetic experience. And also, but we can talk about that later, we have this concept that I created called aesthetics, meaning that this is something where you value ethics as well as aesthetic, or as aesthetic. Okay, that's the first question. Sorry. Second, we might not have time for all the questions because I also want to hear your questions, but the second question is, can arte util criteria change? This is the criteria for arte util, and of course, this is only a first step. And because arte util is a practice that understands, is a, let's say, a dialogical practice, is something that it understands change as part of its own nature, all of these criteria can change somehow, and also not all of the work has to have all of the 8, but for sure 1, 4, and 6. So you have to propose something new in the art, new use for art, you have to be implemented in the real, and you have to have a beneficial outcome. But hopefully that will change, all the things could change with time and with the practice and so on. How does arte util relate to art history and earlier movement? Well, arte util we have created a timeline. Let me see if I can find. We have created a timeline that, in the timeline we are showing that Arte Util comes from a long and old tradition. It's not something that only happens now in the present. It's something that has a long history, and we like to start actually with examples that are not exactly from the arts, but they are from the social working world and the social practice and so on. Let me see. It's short. So yeah, so it is also a heritage, let's say, of social engaged art and so on. But I think it goes a little bit beyond in the sense of trying to reach not only proposing something, but actually making something really happening. So sorry. So here, for example, we start with John Ruskin, Migratory Dairy School. We have. Let me see if I have. So we have also, this woman who created in 1870 the first housekeeping cooperative. We have also, for example, a scientist who created the first seed bank. And of course, then we enter this idea of art, and of course, Arte Util has a lot to give to the Russian constructivists, and all this time in which actually a government decided that art has to be useful, socially useful. So this is extremely important for this project. And then, of course, we go to the example like Legislative Theater, Augusto Boal, and so on. And so yeah, and I can give you access to this. So this is there. Another question is everything outside Arte Util useless? Of course not, because this is a question that I get a lot, because a lot of people get extremely sensitive that Arte Util means that the rest of the art practices are not necessary. And this is not what we're saying. What we're saying is that there are other uses. Let's say if you see a painting, if you have a horrible life and you need break, you go to a museum, you see a painting, you can have this other experience, etc. We still understand that as useful, but it's a usefulness that do not generate, let's say, an activation of yourself as an active citizen. So it is a use that is still very much in the idea of art is a mental activity, or is a kind of passive activity where you are consuming or having one experience that will change you interiorly, but not be reflected in your, let's say, social desire for change and activation for change. Can useful art be outside of art? Can useful art be outside of Arte Util? This is kind of the same question. And the answer in this case is no, because if it's useful art, it's Arte Util. So this is very quick question. And that is important because, for example, in this project we have, as you have seen, appropriated practices that have not been seen before as art, or practices that have not been seen in the arts as an artistic practice. And the reason for that is like Arte Util is a practice that mainly wants to imagine society functioning in a different way, meaning that whatever you propose have to be not only beneficial, like in a plain, direct way, but has to trigger something in your brain, in your speculative being, in your imagination of how society will work if this is the norm. Because usually Arte Util is not the norm. Arte Util is, let's say, the accidents or the alteration of the norm. But it will help you think, okay, what happens if you go to a store and you can still take for free the clothes, or what, it does trigger you a different imagination of what society is and how it works. but also what is the role that you have as an artist as well. No? And in this case, for example, we have used as one of the main examples for Arte Util the Rolling Jubilee, which is part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, in which they have created this solution for the debt, where they buy, they have understood the loophole of the economic system, and they are buying debt and liberating the debt after that. So already when you hear about this, it's totally, you know, somebody who is in debt think this will be forever kind of prison that they have, and then this, and also this idea of generosity, because they are buying the debt without knowing who they are liberating. So it's not a self-beneficiary situation, no? So is Arte Util trying to change the art world system from the inside? Yes. Very quickly. Yes, because it's a critique of the art system. This, I think, is evident. And also of the value of the set of values the art world is having at the moment, especially the role of the market and the role of the artist as a lately even celebrity situation. No? Does Arte Util always have to be a problem solver? And where is the room for art? Yes, of course, the idea is to have this attitude where art can solve a problem. But the art, as I said before, is kind of the moment where you can still speculate and use your imagination for understanding your role and your position in society differently than it currently is. And also it helps you to imagine and to fantasize about things in a different way. So it's still the... Okay, what happens when a project is certified as Arte Util, but it will not be intended to be Arte Util? So, certification, the way we are choosing the work, and at the moment I'm doing an exhibition called Museo de Arte Útil in the Van Abbe Museum. And one of the main problems we encounter with the selection of the piece is that a lot of artists had a practice that looks like Arte Útil, because they really have the intention and the desire to change society through their work and so on, but it actually encountered many different difficulties. Either because at the beginning the institution were not open for this kind of practice, so if an artist come with this project, the museums or exhibition or curator do not want to do this, therefore they will not have support or money, or because there was not technical condition for this. So therefore we have created three categories. We have created proposal, which is mostly older work that want to be like this but do not have, as I said, the conditions. We have created another section that is prototypes, meaning artists who were able to propose this and to make actual one example or two of what they wanted to have. And a good example is, for example, is Homeless Vehicle from Wojcicko, for example, which he made this as a prototype, but it was not implemented in reality. It was just as an example of something that could happen. And then we have the third case, which is the Arte Util examples, which is people who really made this into the real and to make it functioning, and like Wochenklausur, that actually some of their projects were even like 13 or 20 years functioning. So we have these three categories, but at the same time we have to certify them. Why? Because many times, in part because the art world have this situation where they love his stories so much. There are many artists who come with this story like, oh, I did this device, and this device have done this, and I worked with 7 immigrants, and they were so happy. And then what happened is like the sole source of certification for the work is the artist himself, who makes the story about what happened. So what we have done is all the works that we are going to have in the show are certified not by the artist, but either by the user or the producer of the work. Why? Because, for example, I was recently in Mexico and I was talking to somebody who was the curator, Osvaldo Sanchez, who was the curator of Insight, and I was asking him about certain works that were produced for his show that I always consider arte útil for sure, because I talked to the artist and it's, yeah, everybody use it, and we had these stories that are wonderful. And then he was very honest and say, this was our intention, but at the end we encountered difficulties because several reasons, either social or time or money, etc. So he was like, no, that was only, it never happened. So we realized that we have to certify the work with people who really use the work, to make sure how they feel, if it really was what they wanted, etc. So yes, sometimes you have a work that you certify as arte útil, and it was not intended to be art. One example is NSK passport. I'm sure you know this example, and where they created this false passport, a passport for this false country. And it was, of course, all autonomous, fantastic art for imagination only. But then what happened is, like, they show in South Africa, in the biennial, and some of the people there realized that they were doing passports for free. And a lot of people apply for this passport from Nigeria, and they actually start using this passport to go to other countries. And some were able to use it until they find out, and of course, and actually what we know is that the artists went themselves there to explain people don't use it. This is like an example, this is a joke, this is art, this is not real. And Nigerians, people that they were talking to, say, we don't care, we're going to try. You know? And then this is an example of when the artist is not intended to do something useful, but people find the use and do it. So yes, it's possible. How are we doing in energy? Okay. Okay, who decides what problems needs to be solved? This is a good question, because usually in art it's the artist who decide. And I think in this case, it also makes the artists see themselves as an active citizen. So when you make a decision about what the problem you have to solve is not you as an artist, but you as a citizen who say, I have this problem. And because I have this problem, I need to solve it. And then you use the tools that you know as artists to solve it, you know? So yes, this is very important to say. Is it possible for arte útil to go outside of the art world and be sustainable? Yes, actually, in order to be arte útil, you have to go away from the art world at some point and interact with the real world, and whatever that means, you know. Sorry. Whatever that area you're working with, so you have to go outside of the art world. And of course, there is something that in this case is very important. It's like there are two different audiences for this practice. People who are using the proposal, and the art world. So for the art world, this will always be art. And they will always see it from the point of view of art, like, oh, does it function? Yeah, it remind me Capro, it remember this, it remember, you know, social engaged art from the 60s. It will always have this perspective. But from the users, this question is not so important as the first question. Then the art will come later. Then they realize it's art later, after they are already engaged and already understand that this has a benefit for them. And I think in a way, for me, it has been a personal solution for this problem with contemporary art and working with communities that are not insiders in the art world, so they don't know exactly what's going on in the art world and they lack some history. So for me, it has been a very good solution, personally in my own projects, to have arte útil, because people really like contemporary art, and people want more contemporary art, and they really engage in contemporary art, but they enter from a different door, you know? So yeah. Who is arte útil for? I think arte útil is for society and people in society. So arte útil is for whoever has the problem you're trying to solve. and also for the rest who don't have this problem to be, let's say, inspired or see how this can be changed and say, okay, maybe I can change something else. Do Arte Util have to have ethics? Sorry, that was good that I had this Freudian slip. Does Arte Util have to have ethics? Absolutely. This is why we create this as ethic concept. And yes, because ethics is the main aspect of Arte Util, because it is, let's say, a way to not only to evaluate, but a way to work. It has to be an ethical way to work. Ethical doesn't mean legal. These are two different things. Many of the Arte Util examples are illegal and are illegal. Illegal in Spanish is like a and legal together, is a word that means something that has not been yet regulated by the law. So it's something that exists, like you can do, and if you go to court, they don't know what to do with you because they don't have any rules for this. And this is something important because many Arte Util artists use legal loopholes to do their work. Because once you enter into the social sphere, you enter also in the sphere of regulations and legal sphere. And you have to deal a lot with legality, illegality, and illegality. So I think, yes. Mm-hmm. Which are the ethical limits? This was also a very good question. I think if you create an ethical ecosystem in the group you're working with, that will tell you what the limits are, you know? And I think the limits are related to, of course, not killing anybody and all this stuff that is very evident, but also the limits are in the level of comfort that people working with you have. That doesn't mean that you cannot push people into areas they don't know and they're not used to and not comfortable, but you need to have an educational process. I feel that there is no limits if you educate people. If you engage in this educational process where things are being explained, exchanged, understood, then everything can happen. Of course, not killing people is very important. But making revolution is okay, taking people out of power is okay too. How much politics have to be in Arte Util? I think a lot. And also, I had this question the other day too, that every Arte Util has to be political. The correct answer to make you feel good is no, but the real answer is yes. Why? Because if you start entering the social sphere, and if you start wanting to change something, immediately you're engaged in this kind of power struggle and power games and power discussion, so of course it's political. And all of it is social. So yeah, I think in this case social and political is very connected in a way, no? How do you evaluate Arte Util? This is a very important question because I think some of the ways to evaluate is, as I said before, making the users part of the process, like the evaluation process, but also see what really changed. So it's more than blah, blah, blah. It has to be something in the real that happened. So I think hopefully, and also it's interesting because a lot of art that is social use the media as a way of evaluating their project or a way to have visibility. In this case, the media is not so important because Arte Util is not about doing awareness campaigns. It's about changing something concrete. If in order to change you need to use the media, then you use it, but it's not necessary. Like I see a lot of social engaged artists very worried about, oh my God, we don't have anything in the papers, nobody's talking about us in the newspaper. In this case, this is not so important. Does Arte Util needs an outsider evaluator or critic, for example, an art critic, and how are the criteria, do they need new criteria to evaluate? Yes, I think there is a need of new criteria for evaluating this kind of work, but also the need of new lexicon, which is something we're working on, and trying to find new words that are talking about what this practice is, because another thing that I see happening a lot is that let's say you have a socially engaged art project, and then critics come and they want to evaluate it as you were a painting. Like, oh, the aesthetic of this photo is not so good. Well, it's not about the photo, it's about what happened in the place, and did people enjoy it, and if something changed, you know? So I think this is also a problem I have encountered, that sometimes people are trying to impose a regime of understanding, a regime of evaluation that is not belonging to the practice. So in this case, this is very important, and we are actually, for the exhibition, trying to finish on time, like a lexicon where we're trying to work with Stephen Wright is helping us to do this. But also, there is also a need for a different behavior from the critic, because also the critic, like many audience members, come for 10 minutes, look at something and go, and then they write 7-page article for Art News or Art in America or Art Forum or whatever, judging your work. This is something, or sometimes they don't even come. They just read in the website what you put and they have their opinion. This happened to me. I'm not making jokes. This happened to me many times with this project I'm doing now. And so, for example, in my case, I ask the critics to have a participatory criticism, meaning that they have to be part of the project. They have to be an active part of the project and not be afraid of this critical distance they need. No, you have critical distance inside. You can be critical when you are inside too. And also, for example, I have now a critic, an art historian who wants to write about the project, and I say the condition for him to do this is they have to either give a workshop on my project, which is workshop-based, and this is somebody people pay a lot of money to go to his class in Princeton, so this is going to be fabulous for free. And or he has to be a volunteer in the project, or he has to somehow give back. So this idea of the critic coming from this kind of upper view is not possible in this project because it doesn't work. It creates a friction, it creates a tension that is not productive for doing criticism. So also I feel like the art critics need to establish a different set of criteria to judge and to criticize this work. Yeah. This is does Arte Util ends when the problem is solved? Yes. Yes, it's done. But then there is another question, because does Arte Util create problem after solving one? And this is true because there is a kind of residual effects. We had, for example, one example is Wochenklausur, again, because we just finished talking about them 2 minutes ago in the class. So I'm learning how to say it in German. Wochenklausur. Yeah. So, for example, they created this piece in 95 with the immigrants. 5 with the immigrants. You are the other group, yeah, sorry. 95, where they, what was the title? Immigrant
issues problem. Immigrant labor issues.
Immigrant labor issues. And they made this project where they were these asylum seekers, and they were going to be deported, and they decided to make them artists, put the label of artists and hire them as artists to do social sculpture art, and that way they were not deported, you know. But of course what happened is the law changed after this, because they realized this is a loophole. So yes, sometimes Arte Util solves one problem and maybe creates another one. But that's okay, because then you have to solve the other one, hopefully. So yeah, there are sometimes residual effects like this, which is not so good. And the other question is like, who take care of these residual effects? You know, and hopefully, if the work is done properly, these people who are not artists per se, but Arte Util practitioners, have learned how to do this, and they can apply it to other problems themselves, and they don't need any more the quote-unquote artist or initiator to come. And what is the difference between Arte Util and social design and social movements? It is using those tools as well. I think Arte Util is a multidisciplinary practice that doesn't distinguish, like this is art, this is social design, but just use the tool of everything. And the best examples of Arte Util collaborative groups have politicians, sociologists, artists, architects, everything the same way, together. So it's not, yeah. It says, if an art util failure is not an option. This is one of our statements. So how do you deal when the project doesn't go as you think, or it fails? Then it's not arte util. Because an artist, an arte util practitioner keep going and trying to find new solutions. If it doesn't work, they find another until they solve it. So it's a very tiring practice. I don't recommend it. It's better to be in the studio on your own and fail miserably. What happened to the responsibility to initiator leave? Again, hopefully if you are done your work right, you have prepared these people to go on, and you can leave at any point that they are ready to do it on their own. So this is not so much. I'm going to do only one more. I have like a lot of more, but I want to hear your questions as well. I'm going to do one that I like. It's possible for arte util to be conservative, to do arte util, conservative arte util. This, I think, was very funny, because this is my fear, my biggest fear. I think so far, and I can show you some examples, and of course you can enter to the website. The website is still it's not finished, it's still working situation, but you have in the archive some lectures from some of the artists who have talked with us about this subject that you can see. And you have the case studies, and I invite you to go and see some of the case studies. This is not perfect, this is just very quickly to start having something online. But hopefully all of the examples we have so far, the ones we have selected, hopefully are trying to imagine society in a non-conservative way, and also in a humanistic way, not in a consumeristic, but in a humanistic way. So hopefully it's not conservative, but of course, if these kind of projects start to be like everything, co-opted by the art world or taken too much by all of these people who find they can have some personal benefit out of this, then it can become conservative, of course, because this is a methodology, you know. It is an ideology. Arte util is an ideological practice, but also it's a methodology. So methodologies can be applied to anything. So far it's an ideology because everybody working is trying to imagine a society that is beneficial to the more instead of the less, you know. So now maybe we should open to question.
Perhaps we start with Christoph Draeger.
Oh, sorry, Christoph, sorry.
Yeah. I also forgot to say Christoph Draeger is the kind of correspondent today.
Yeah.
And so perhaps we start.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay, sorry. Then
okay. Yeah, well,
and you were in my project, you know what it is about.
yeah. I was. But yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
You want to sit over there, then it's easier to listen.
Okay.
To you.
You want to sit here so you can.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this inspiring talk. I all of a sudden feel slightly useless. And I was thinking about, did I do ever anything useful in the art, apart from the useless things that I do a lot. And I think the closest that I came to do arte util was when I created the hippie movement in Warsaw. Now, of course, to initiate a hippie movement is per se a little controversial, because hippies are not regarded as particularly useful elements of society. And that was exactly the project. I was trying to celebrate some kind of like the Summer of Love, 40 years too late, in a country that never had a Summer of Love. And I brought them silly clothes and silly ideas, what could be done to waste their time. You know, like, and I bought drugs also from the budget of the, like I was on a residency in the Uostovsky Castle, and And of course, the whole thing became something that Tania would probably then refuse, because I always had a camera, you know. And finally, my project that lasted 3 months, and everybody was really engaged and doing all these hippie activities and smoking a lot of joints and being really silly, and also absorbing the insults from the normal people in Warsaw, because Warsaw is kind of like conservative society. We were treated as, you know, homosexuals and stuff. Yeah, very Catholic, and they called us, yeah, look at these homosexuals and blah blah blah, because we were wearing all these long robes and, you know, like hair and stuff like that. And but finally, of course, my result from the workshop was a movie. It's called The Hippie Movie, and it's kind of like this movie about this movement, you know. And we did a few protests as well, like we protested against war, you know, for peace and stuff like that. So, so that was my contribution to Arte Util. I don't know if that was very valid.
Certify it.
Yeah, like I put it up for certification. maybe I get lucky. But I was just before this talk, I was trying to like pick my brain and think about the term Arte Util without knowing what Tania understands. Or I mean, I had like some suspicions, of course, what Tania was thinking about Arte Util, and I was trying to take it from my angle and find a few examples of Arte Util. But first, I still want to throw in a quote, which is basically my favorite quote about art ever. And it's by Ed Reinhardt, who said, "Art is art and everything else is everything else." So, one student gave me Jeremy Deller's inflatable Stone Edge, which is kind of like a fun thing for useful art, but also we were talking about his film The Battle of Orgrave, where he reenacted basically the miners' strikes from back then, from the Thatcher area, with the same protagonists, and swapped roles. So the policemen would become the miners, and the miners would become the policemen. And I believe that within this process, that this was really a catharsis for the participants. When I was thinking back to my hippie movie when the camera was rolling, I was also kind of like thinking back to the end of the hippies in per se, which can be almost defined as the festival of Altamont, that was put on as a free concert by the Rolling Stones, which was actually just like a coulisse, like an event that they organized in order to have good footage for a movie that they were shooting, Gimme Shelter. And of course what happened there was this black kid got murdered, and the footage entered into the movie, and the movie kind of became the legacy of the end of the hippie area. And I was thinking about Christoph Draeger, of course, who is an artist, a very controversial artist, who works with a very, very fat, rich gallery. It's called Hauser and Wirth, and they're all about the art market, and they're like one of the powerhouses. And what he did in this powerhouse in their branch in Piccadilly, he put up like a entertainment center for old folks. So like he offered all these recreational activities for old people, and made it known in the area, and it was really used. Like a lot of old folks came there to do yoga and to do like sword fighting and to do poker playing and billiard playing and pool and so on and so on. But then I was also thinking about people like Santiago Serra, who are doing participatory art in a very kind of destructive way. He, for example, famously paid a truck driver in Mexico to turn his truck perpendicular to the highway and create one of the biggest traffic jams ever recorded in this country, not to speak of the danger for the truck driver to be assassinated. And of course other actions where he pays people minimum wage to, let's say, hold a 45-degree angle wall for 8 hours in place, or have a line tattooed on the back of participants that are lined up just for the purpose of basically carrying out his artwork and being paid for it. So it's kind of a trade, like these people are still getting paid and prefer to get paid than not to participate. Simon Starling, who took down a shed, made a boat, rowed down the river, and then took the boat out of the river and put up a shed. Another kind of like useless, useful activity. A lot of these projects that came to my mind were kind of like almost a mockery of the idea of art that should be useful. But Tina Segal, for example, who doesn't want to work with objects and who doesn't want to work with documentations, he has projects like this Progress that he put up at the Guggenheim, where you would be, as a visitor, approached by a young girl who starts to talk to you about a subject matter, and then all of a sudden you be like somebody, the subject matter always being connected to the idea of progress, and as you progress up the stairs of the museum, like this famous rotunda, you will be, encounter another person, and as you gradually go up, the people who talk to you are getting older, and subject matters are getting deeper. Yeah, so these are just a few examples, and maybe a last example about extreme use of art is Abramovich, Marina Abramovich, who puts up a table with tools that should be used on her body, and people did, including, I think, a knife and a gun.
Jeez, I have to redo the whole... Okay, I have to fix now everything you have done. Okay.
Sorry.
I thought I was convincing them, and then you come and, Okay, no. No, I think you're right in one thing. I mean, all the examples you brought, except the Marina example, also the Marina, like all of the examples you brought are critics to capitalism, in a way, are critical of capitalism, and that is something that is linked to Arte Util, because Arte Util is hopefully, I don't want to say it in public because I don't want to fix it, but it's kind of not pro-capitalist per se, because it's always challenging this. But in this case, yes, and also this idea that Arte Util comes from political art practices, because it is a political practice as well. But I think the difference is, like, all of the examples you have given, which are excellent work and works I like very much as an artist, are awareness campaigns, or they are acts of psychological endeavor, like psychological activity, or there are cases where even they are entertainment. So I think these are three ways of using art that is not something we're interested at, because these are the in a way, if you have all of this, if you do, for example, if you want to criticize, like Santiago Sierra, the capitalist exploitation and so on, then it will not stop on showing you the problem, but then the Arte Util will start from there and try to do something to change the situation. And for example, and then there you can bring somebody like Augusto Boal in Teatro Legislativo, Legislative Theater, where he understands that something is happening. He shows to you in the group there is a problem. They show you what the problem is, but then it's not like in a play where you see this and you go home and say, oh my God, you saw this problem we have. No, actually you can change, you as an audience can change the situation and can actually propose a law that in the room, at the moment, there are politicians, local politicians, hearing all this, and they propose a law that later is being given in the mayor office to change the law. So that is, I almost feel that Arte Util is the postdata of the political art. It's like what will come after what we have done so far, which is telling people, hey, this is happening, do something. But we don't propose to do something, we don't activate this, do something about it. So I feel that's the answer for this.
But maybe then the question still should be asked if Arte Util is still art, you know. Very much, I feel like a lot of your examples, they really go into in the social-political field of social workers, first responders, people who have an entire different background. And like, you know that I work a lot with this idea of disaster and destruction and stuff like that. And I always felt like, yeah, it would be interesting to do a project responding to a disaster other than through mediation or the media and stuff like that. But then I felt like you know, who I am. You know, like there is such an incredible structure with the UN and the Red Cross and all these people who are highly trained and who are highly funded and so on. So I felt like it's almost, you know, it's beyond my role as an artist to intervene there. Okay, this is maybe an extreme field, and I totally take the point that it is possible as an artist to change the world, or at least change something in the world within socio-political projects. But I think it's a fine limit, you know, and I just wonder, where does art stop and social work begin?
I want to put up the issue of efficiency, because this is a discussion I very often have with the Wochenklausur, because my feeling is that this efficiency criteria, which is kind of eliminating the failure possibility in a way, is very much attached to late capitalism and is fulfilling what late capitalism wants us to be. And this is one of the main problems I have with your concept of arte util.
Bueno, the first thing is like, yes, can I answer first? Yeah. So I think the first thing is like, yes, we enter in the realm of social work, but the artist is not a social worker, because believe me, right now I'm working with a lot of social workers, and the way they are structured in terms of the way they think, it's not artistic at all. It's very programmatic, and it's like, these have worked for 40 years, so we're going to keep doing it. This is what we, like all the social workers we're working with, is very hard to change their mind, because it's like, no, this worked in the 70s, so we're still doing it now, because it still works, you know? When the artist actually, it is art because we bring to the situation, yes, a knowledge that this is a social, and that you need to address the social aspect and the rules that control society and social situations. But you come with a creative solution, and you come with something nobody has thought about and nobody imagined, or people are not, like, going out of the loop, you know, out of the normal way of thinking, you know. So I think this is why it's art, because it's not completely using the same kosher rules, you know. It has its own ethics, but it's not the same ethics of, you know, a social worker and so on. So I think, yes, sometimes you have to collaborate with the UN, or you have to collaborate with social worker, but that doesn't mean that you are going to become them. You still be trained to think a certain way, to act in a certain way, and that's what you bring. But the other thing is, like, I feel like a lot of people at the beginning have a reaction to this arte util idea, because we have been trained as artists not to think that way. Like all our years of training as a student, and all our years of training as working professionally, is the opposite of arte util. You know, it took me almost 10 years to find a museum who wants to do a show about arte util. because nobody wants to do this, because the museums are also institutions who are not created for this exact thing. And they create problem in their own mandates as institution when you start going into the social or the political and trying to change stuff, So I think the art world is made in a way that is very clear, the limits. You can play with fire, but you cannot, really produce the fire, or something like this.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, like lately, I had the impression that especially at biennials and institutions, there were not only two. It's a little more, but it's almost like a parallel industry, I say, in a provocative way, to the art market. The art market obviously doesn't let Arte Util really enter with like a few examples, but then the artist has to change. I would name Michael Rakowitz, who is now who changed over, became kind of a gallery artist, and who tries still to, in a way, promote his art, his image as a socially engaged artist. It's not really working, but institutions have been increasingly interested in that kind of work, and also have been funding a lot of these works. So actually, I've seen quite a lot of work that have been socially engaged, and that almost became like a parallel world within the art world, and I welcome that. Don't take me wrong. I'm very happy about it. Because the art market, as it is, has become really quite boring, So, but I don't agree that you're still on the fringes. I think you're very much in the focus of the discussion in a way, and people are paying attention.
Yeah, it has been a parallel practice for sure for a long time. This is what we are in the thing. But what we're doing is not social art practice only, it's arte util, so it's a little more complicated and it's not so easy to convince people so far, but whatever. So I want to talk about efficiency very quickly. Yes, I think efficiency is very important, and I understand what you mean about this kind of the late capitalism efficiency attitude and not failing and all this. But also at the same time, I feel that sometimes as artists, we get so happy when we fail, and we have this kind of also training to stop when we fail, and stop and contemplate failure. And I think these kind of projects are locating the failure in society, not in the artist itself, or not in the production, but seeing society as the failure, in a way.
I think a social worker is also an artist sometimes.
Oh, not so sure. Sometimes it's a little boring, to be honest. So not so creative, but yeah. Okay. If you doubt already, this is very good. You cannot say, yes, this is social work. It's already Sorry.
Like Eden here. I'm part of these institutions that are becoming like social.
Yeah, say the name of the institution.
Yeah, the Picasso Museum in Malaga. So we have been working with so-called social issues for 10 years, and the thing that the first step that we did, we look around what is been going on, and we felt, as Tania said, that most of the artists were doing like isolated actions, like for themselves. So, for instance, one artist went to a hidden tribe in Peru, and then did this amazing project with photography, and then left. So nothing was, what the community wasn't involved in a way that they could continue with this project. And then the other thing is that institution, most of them, and we were part of it, but I think we are in one step that we're become aware of that, so we don't want to do it anymore. More, most of the institution, we have the feeling that they are, they do like a workshop with, let's say, people from the jail, and it's wonderful, and they have a lot of fun, but that's it. So I think like the art to be useful for us, I mean, we need a structure because we come from an institution. So I think you have to have objectives and you have to evaluate. And I think evaluation is a very important part of the project. We are dealing with that because we don't know. It's not an art evaluation. It's not a social evaluation. We have to invent the new tools for that. But I mean, it's a fashion program in the institution, but I don't think it's consistent enough to really change something in.
No, I think there is a problem with institution because yes, there are more institutions interested in social engaged art, and it has become some sort of like more mainstream maybe or something. But I feel like the institution have to change for this to happen correctly, because first of all they have to see themselves as civic institutions instead of just museums, you know, first. Secondly, I feel that to think about what their commitments of these projects they are doing are, because some of these projects need 3-5 years to be happening, but maybe they only have 3 months. And then what does it mean? This is very violent when a project has to be done in 3 years and you have to do it in a month and a half because there's a show schedule, you know? And so I think it also demands from some institution, the one who seriously want to take care of this, to at least say, okay, one project a year we're going to do for a whole year or something like some other structure, and understanding the relation of the long term for sustainability and also for this. Yeah.
But is it not a contradiction per se if you prepare an exhibition about Arte Util at the Van Abbe Museum? Like you basically allow your idea to be institutionalized, exhibited as an object, and people go there and they spend 20 seconds per work.
We had a discussion today about this. No. Okay, so the reason why I'm doing the Van Abbe Museum is because I want to use the institution. Because this concept, I had it for 10 years, and I didn't develop so much, but the last 3-5 years I'm more into it, and the last 2 years extremely into it. And then I have done a few events, like discussions and stuff, a magazine in Spain and in New York, we did a discussion, and it feels like I need the white elephant in the room to talk, you know, and then is the desire, I mean, I don't have any desire for this to be institutionalized. I think if you work in the margin, it's even better because it has more mobility and more possibility. But also it's good to have the access of the art world money and all this and visibility, maybe. But the reason I did this is because, first of all, I wanted to show a historical link. Like I wanted to show that this is a long practice. And this is what museums do. Museums put things in context, historical context. You know, especially the Van Abbe Museum, which is very into what is art for and questioning the social function of art and so on. So I think this idea of presenting a kind of timeline situation where people can understand the development of this, like how this started from one thing and then became something else until what it is now. This is something the museum as an institution can do very well. Secondly, right now, at one point I said to the director, no. Let's empty the museum and give the money to one project. And they can use the money for doing the project. And everybody got very nervous. and then at the end I said, as a social point of view, it's good. But as an art point of view, because it has to be good for both. It cannot be just social. It also has to be good in the art world too, you know. I said, that's an old gesture to do this. Close a museum is not so interesting. So I want to also for myself and the rest of the people also to bring the problem of how you visualize and how you promote or visualize these kind of projects. And if the institution, which is a question that we have right now, suits this purpose. So I think it's very interesting because all the discussion we have with the artists in the exhibition at the moment is this: how do we show it? Do people have to do this? Do people have to do that? And for example, I came up today with the help of all the students. In the discussion we came up with this idea of like, yes, the 10-second situation where you come and see a video for 10 seconds instead of the 3 hours it is. And then we were thinking about possible ways in which we can do that. And one idea, which I don't know if it's going to go all the way, but is to probably have tickets. So you can be in the project instead of look at the project. You can be part of a project that is happening at the moment of the show. You know, like let's say that you invite a group that is talking about some issue in town, and you can be part of that. So I don't know. These are the challenges I have. And to be honest, I think it was very good because the Van Haven Museum is a very serious museum. And so I didn't do it in MoMA, you know. And I could have done it in MoMA, but I didn't do it in MoMA. I did it in Van Haven because I know this institution is more into this academic discussion, you know, and more serious, no, than this. And also they have a big collection of constructivist art, very big collection. So I think all of this for me was important to connect, no? So yeah, so in this case, this is the challenge, and I know I can be criticized by this, but we have a huge discussions. I cannot give more details about how we're going to do the show because then you won't go to the show, but the people in the class know more details of how we're thinking about how to use the space. But the one thing I can say is that we want everything in the museum to be useful. Like all the normal museum things to have a useful or benefit for the people. So it's not only, you know what I mean?
Well, but every Mondrian that is hanging on the wall has a benefit for the people, no?
Yeah, but we already talked about this. This idea of mental benefit. I think when you have a problem, you have, when people have problems or encounter a problem, we did an exercise the other day looking at this. You have two ways to solve it. One is you go into the psychological road where you start thinking and psychological and thinking is my psychology problem, and you know, and this lead you into autonomous art, definitely. And then there is another way when you have a problem where you are like, okay, I'm fucked, this is my problem, how can I solve it? And then you go into Arte, you know, so I think this is the way.
When to produce Arte until they go to a psychotherapy.
Yes, you have more fun.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Why you don't want to stay still in the field of art and don't go, for example, to a real political, like, for example, what simply mentioned homeless.
That's my next project. I'm creating a political party for Cuba, but I need to finish this first. Yes, this is my problem right now. Is I have a lot of ideas. Everything is mapped out in my brain, but time is not enough. I want to make everything quick so I can go to. Yeah, but that's my project, my next project.
And this is then not art, or is it still?
I don't know yet. I haven't done it.
We will ask you.
Next year, every year we have. Yeah.
I have a question, because like if the project works the way you described it, it should be effective, like so it doesn't
Beneficial, yeah.
Yeah, it should create a certain exposure because it's still going to have some aesthetic value that creates a participation that is supposed to be in that, so that gives an exposure, and it's going to engage with these communities. And when this gets appropriated by culture industry and potentially also tourism, don't you see a risk of overexposing certain communities and create gentrification in the communities that the projects are supposed to help? And if you do see that, how do you want to deal with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I'm glad that people are beyond the actual, already like if we're in the future, so this is very, very exciting. So I think the exposure versus like an aesthetic value, if I'm correct, in a way you link exposure with aesthetic value because it's art. That's not something we're doing because there is not exposure in these projects. Many of these projects are very anonymous, very down, they're not so well known, for example. And part of this is because they can't be well known because some of these are illegal, you know, and also because they're very boring. Like if you are 3 years working with a community discussing one problem, nobody wants to really, it's really boring, you know, it's not like this exposure because it's art. But I understand what you mean about having access to things coming from the arts. Like, for example, you can have better access to politicians probably if you go through the arts, so you can have grants, so you can have, although it's not so easy to have a grant when you do art total, but or you have, you know, all of these benefits that the art world brings. And this, yes, this I think is something that we come with when we are going to this community, and this is very good. The idea of gentrification and being taken so far, all the examples we have seen in a study are very small and very localized problems. They're not, nobody's trying to solve the world hunger, you know, or nobody's trying to solve poverty in the world. Everything is extremely localized in a city, in a place, in a group of people. And I understand maybe what you mean about tourism, because this kind of artistic tourism, where people go to this social project as tourists to see, oh, look what this person did with this community. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Also, this may be the source already of the gentrification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, yes, I understand this question, but so far it has not happened. Now, maybe it's now that you say it, maybe I have to be more aware if the way I'm presenting this can make this as a consequence. So maybe it's something I have to be aware of, not to let this happen.
If you put it in the museum, if the exposure that you say is not there yet, it may arrive. Yeah, that's a good question, because maybe I have to think about how to counterbalance this. Because so far none of this project had that problem, because again, they are long-term, which is boring, nobody has the attention for this. And also because the communities that work, they're not, and some of, for example, there is this work by Nuria Well, where she takes the doors out of the houses, so people who have been evicted can go in again without being in prison, because this is not illegal for them, but it's illegal for her. So I think these kind of examples are very hard to be seen. They might be consumed in a mediated way, meaning in a magazine or like a distant way instead of direct experience. But yeah, that's something I have to think of, and thanks for that. I'll take it into consideration. Are you convinced? Was I useful?
Was I useful?
It's important. Yes, that's the part. You see, when you start doing it, it's like, you really cannot see outside right now. If you give me, we are actually, I forgot, so sorry. Two things very quickly. If you have more examples of arte util that you think are arte util, please send it to us, because we are putting more examples in the archive. And we are open because we don't know everything. We need more. And the other thing, today at 5:30, we're going to put a movie of Christoph Draeger of the documentary about Please Love Austria, which is one potential or not arte util project. And it's going to be in our room. In what's the room number? I don't know.
Castle House.
Huh?
Castle House.
Castle House. Is there when you go down, right there.
At what time?
5:30. And we can continue. Sorry. Yeah. You can give me.